Hello, you are welcome to another interesting edition of Your Image, and we want to continue from where we stopped last week. Last week we took a cursory look at what corporate exploitations are as far as public relations is concerned. We look at the ethical issues that are related to corporate exploitation. We look at definitions, various definitions and forms of exploitations that we have. And in the studio with me this week, I still have Mr. Jamiu Folari from the Department of Mass Communication, Crescent University, Abeokuta. Mr. Folari, you are welcome once again.
Good evening. Thank you.
On my left here, also, I have a veteran public relations officer, one-time chairman of the Nigerian Institute of Public Relations, Ogun State chapter. He's also a fellow of the Institute. Mr. Aki Okudero is very much in the studios with me. You are welcome, sir.
Akene, you are good to go.
This week, we want to look at some of the issues that are related to public relations and corporate exploitation. I want to look at the justification now. Mr. Folari, some people were trying to justify this corporate exploitation. Are they truly justified, taking a cognizance into various labor laws that we have in Nigeria, especially the Part 2, Section 199 of the 1990 labor law that I cited last week? Okay,
the issue of justification, no matter what you do, you want to justify whether good or bad. When you talk about corporate exploitation, corporate organization, we want to achieve its objectives. And every organization, whether profit or non-profit, whether government or non-governmental organization, we spell out from the beginning specific objective. For example, organization that says we want to make profits, and in an attempt to make profits, they engage in exploitative means to make this profits. That's one goal. The justification is that our aim is to make profits. So whatever we can do to make that profit is a justification, whether it's now an exploitation against another party. So that's one justification. Then also, when we look at employment, we are talking about community. You are situated in a community, for example, and you are exploiting the raw material in that community. We mentioned last week that of the Niger Delta, and you feel that you've invested a lot in that business, and you want to gain your money back. So if it will even affect the health of the community, you are less concerned. Or you are, for example, let's cite another example, issue of you want to employ people, and you feel that the cost of production, cost of recruitment will be high. And because of the large number of applicants, for example, you want to employ and fill vacancy for 30 and over 100,000 applied. The cost of taking care of over 100,000, that's another justification by employers that the cost will be so high. But all these and many others are not tenable. They are not enough to exploit the community, to exploit employee. For example, you talk about 200, 300,000 applying for a job, applicants applying for a job of for 30 spaces. We have technology these days. We have technology architecture that can accommodate that without inviting them, risking their life, traveling from one end to another. You can even have a database, get their data. For example, we have the state government have what we call Ogun State Job Portal. The name and data of all unemployed youths are in that particular data. You can screen it rather than inviting thousands to come for job tests or interview. You can screen from that particular database. So that will reduce the cost rather than saying a justification that you allow them to pay. Also, for community that exploit raw material from a particular community, you don't need to exploit that community just because you want to make profit. If you fail, that's one of the public relation principle. If you fail to take care of your community, the community you reside as an organization, you will not make your profit very well, because if you fail to relate well with host community, then your activities will be hampered one way or the other. So it's better that you try as much as possible to engage the community, ensure you give them their rights, provide amenities that will enable them to feel at home, to see that you are truly concerned, not to exploit them just because you want to make profit. For you to make profit, ensure you don't exploit. If you don't exploit, you will at the end of the day achieve your goal without exploitation.
Okay, Mr. Falani was talking about a corporate social responsibility, and this is when an organization gives back to the community from which it operates. And that takes me to the next question that I've asked Mr. Okudero. Corporate social responsibility is one of the principles of public relations. And the inability of these organizations to give back to the communities, of course, oftentimes has led to crisis, avoidable crisis for that matter. So how does government come in here? Because when you challenge some of these organizations, they claim to have paid tax to government. And why do they need to give back to the communities? So what is the role of government here? And how do we avert crisis when it comes between these communities and the organizations?
Well, it will be out of place to say that government has not done its own bit in coming up with labor laws that will punish any breach on Employment Act. Government also has agencies like the Federal Ministry of Labor and Employment that is empowered to look into the affairs of labor in Nigeria. And we also have some labor centers too that government has unionized, that is, has given teeth to defend the workers, whether junior or senior in the country. And even in the private sector, you have NECA, you have other agencies that do monitor the activities of organizations, even individuals, ensuring that labor is given its adequate care. The issue is that there are always laws guarding against the abuse of exploitation in the community with the employees, even in several forms. And that is why government also came up with some bills. Look at the local content bill that says that if a foreign project is being established, if there's a counterpart or joint venture of Nigeria and another country, and particularly in this oil exploration and the like, you see that the expatriates concentrate on employing their own people. And that's why government, in its own way, has also introduced that local content bill to ensure that certain percentage of the citizens are given the opportunity of not just having gainful employment, but also having adequate training that can expose them to managing the environment in case the expatriates are no longer in that environment. So that is one. Government has also done a lot, but the problem is enforcement. Are there due diligence in the employment process? My colleague said jobs, vacant jobs are supposed to be advertised. How often do we advertise? If you look at the mineral resources that we are talking about in very many local communities, there is no adequate protection. Look at cement production. You will see that there is serious pollution in most of the environments that you have a cement production. And there is anti-pollution law.
Yes.
Is government effecting that law by punishing? So, and that is why there is need not only for government to enforce, there is also the need for people, organs like civil society organizations like labor centers themselves, like even the Ministry of Justice. Because when there are issues on labor, on labor malpractices, they are supposed to take up the matter and prosecute any offending organization or individuals that breaches such labor law. So what we need now is a collective effort at ensuring that we continue to ensure adequate welfare of workers, adequate welfare within communities, adequate welfare in all ramifications, so that production can be effectively done and then growth can be ensured in any particular sector of the economy. Okay. And if you look at it, even the monetary policies that we are talking about, it is because government has not been having due diligence. That is why we have all these unorthodox exchange bureaus and whatever, exploiting and milking our economy. So those are the things that we need to guide against, so that we can have an organized country. We now have an organized activities, and everybody will know its limit. The moment you breach such a law, then you are punished.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Okudora. He has been able to tackle that issue on the angle of government. But oftentimes we have had a cause to see labor unions, picketing organizations, because those organizations, of course, contravenes labor laws in the country, especially those private organizations or corporate organizations where some of the workers are being exploited. So when they picket, it ends like that at times. So in what areas do you think labor unions should enforce these laws to avoid exploitation of workers? And in other areas too, labor unions this time around, they have a role to play.
Yes, the labor union must ensure that they don't only picket, they sustain it and ensure that the objective is met. One, advocacy should continue. Number two, issue of enlightenment and education, because when you look at exploitation, it's all sometimes based on ignorance. So if you are well educated of your rights, you are not only educated, you know the legal paths to tread when your right is being violated, whether as an organization or as an individual. So you will seek redress appropriately. So we don't need to take the laws into our hand. There are legal procedure that we must follow. So what we need, the labor union, apart from ensuring that the condition of service is met when it comes to employee and employer relation, they must also ensure that the corporate organizations are socially responsible. And if they violate this law, they should not just allow it to go after first attempt. They should continue to advocate, they should continue to picket, they should continue to educate, they should continue to serve as intermediary between the employee and the employer, so that at the end of the day, we all smile. When you talk about corporate exploitation, labor union, I must tell you, I've tried over the years. For example, look at the recent minimum wage. Okay. The federal government insisted earlier that it could not afford it, the minimum wage. But when the labor union insisted, that's part of exploitation. Because when we even talk about that 30,000 or what people call take-home pay, cannot even take people,
which some people could not even take them to the bus stop.
Exactly, not you say it's a take-home pay. You cannot take, for example, it means that you have 1,000 naira per day if you calculate even weekends, whereas weekends should not even be part of the calculation. So how can you survive, an average worker survive with 1,000 naira a day? Talks of feeding, talk of accommodation, talks of other expenses. So I think we should commend the labor union for its efforts so far. But what we must also say is that they must continue advocating, educating, and ensuring that they pursue to logical conclusion whatever advocacy they are making to ensure that organization, whether private or public, don't exploit their workers.
That is good. You can also watch this live on the social media network, on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter as well. Your image is the first public relations program on television. And Mr. Folani has mentioned the role of labor unions. Before we go to the public relations approach and communication approach, let's go to the media too. Public relations and the media, they are just like Siamese twins. Some people's voice could not be heard. It can only be, they can only be assisted via the media that we have. In what way do you think the media can also be part of the solutions to the problem we are treating today, sir?
Well, the media is always a means of giving a mass effect to the agitations of the people, and workers are inclusive. Even organizations are inclusive. If there are labor laws that are offensive to the mutual existence of any corporate organization, they are supposed to cry out, and the media are the forum or means by which such agitations can be expressed. So, and at the same time, there are mechanisms, several mechanisms for ensuring that these exploitative tendencies abate. And that is why it is always recommended that there should be dialogue between workers and the management. There should be dialogue between workers and government. There should be dialogue between host communities and organizations that are situated in such an environment. And it is only when dialogue could not solve that problem that you can resort to legal means. We are not supposed to take laws into our own hands.
Just like you said.
And of course, you see that, you know, you cannot control some agitations. When the level of frustration is so high, that is why you have situations where people will take to the road, where we have work stoppages, where we have vandalism and all sorts of negative activities that will impinge on successful production in such an environment. So we advocate that in any corporate environment, they should act according to the laws of the land. They should comply. They should be good corporate citizens, so that there will be mutual gains. The employees will have good welfare packages, and when that is done, automatically the production process will be smooth, and then you can talk about the profit that you have. It is only when you have a peaceful environment that you can have an atmosphere where there can be large turnover of your products, and at the end of the day you now have sales. When you have sales, then you have
productivity.
You now have profit. So, and then it is when that happens that corporate organization can now begin to think of manpower development activities, and when that is done, you see that the environment will thrive. So I think let me just stop at that so that we can.
Okay, now let's look at the to ameliorate this problem of a corporate exploitation, using public relations as a tool to solve the problem. So now, what are the PR strategies do we employ to put a lasting solution to this menace?
You must build the foundation before you talk of the structure. The foundation is basically to have a professional public relation experts handling your organization. It's quite unfortunate these days that we just invite someone that can talk, that can write, that can make noise as public relation experts. We need professionals. If we have professionals, the professional will advise the management and the organization accordingly, because advice matters a lot. And when you give rational and good advice, if it's only a professional. Remember, just like I mentioned last week about the 1979 Mexican statement that has become the foundation of public relation, that is the function of public relation experts to conduct research, to analyze trends, to look at the implication, the positive and negative implications of actions of corporate organizations. That if you exploit your community, you exploit your workers, you exploit your customers, what effect will that have on your general objective and goal? Is the trends, is the public relation expert that will analyze these trends. And it will also do what? Predict the consequences. And that's one of the key words, key statements in the Mexican statement, that it will tell you the consequences of exploitation, that it will at the end of the day backfire to achieving your goals. That if your goal is this, you will not be able to achieve it. If it is profit, you will not be able to achieve it. If it is to change attitude, you will not be able to achieve it. So when you counsel organization leader, you don't counsel alone. You now implement plan program of action. What are these plan program of action for exploitation? For example, after you must have conducted your research, you build confidence. How do you build confidence? By ensuring that if it is community, you ensure you have good community relations. Okay. By giving back to your community. Just like you mentioned about corporate social responsibility, that organization should learn to give back to its community. It's as if you are investing. Whatever you give back to the community, you will, at the end of the day, find out that it will enable you achieve your objective. So also, a part of the program that can be conducted by the public relation and the organization is to have effective feedback mechanism. Because these days, we are unconcerned about the view of our stakeholders, the publics, about our organization. So there is need for good feedback mechanism that will assist the organization to assess itself, whether it has performed well or not. And among others, responsibility. But in summary, for the public relation experts to do well, it must be part of the management function. It must be part of decision maker, so that its recommendation and policy will go down the line. Okay,
the PR man must be part of the management because PR is a management function. So he said, and sir, as a veteran public relations person, as an expert, and as a fellow of the Nigerian Institute of Public Relations, what do you think should be some of the communication approaches to adopt to find a lasting solution to corporate exploitations?
Well, let me first of all say this. I think within the corporate environment itself, there should be appropriate recruitment of employees into the respective areas within the organization. So if the human resource person is not qualified, there is no way that it will have the understanding that certain laws are being breached. So that goes to say that labor laws, employment laws, the laws of the country must be well understood for corporate existence of any organization. That is one. Well, how do we curb exploitation, and how do we communicate to the extent that we can be well educated? For example, federal government created what we call Servicom. The modus operandi of Servicom is to ensure that customers are well served. And if you look at that mission of ensuring that customers are well served, it means that from the production level, you will have taken care of the product and services. They will meet standard. That's why we have Standard Organization of Nigeria to checkmate those people who are producing fake products, substandard products. That is one. So the Servicom people, our Servicom must be established in every organizations. They have done it. The federal government is entrenching that, but I don't know whether that works in the private sector. So if it does not exist in the private sector, there is need to have that. Then besides that, there is need to ensure that every employee's condition of service is strengthened and made available. It should be a handbook for every employee. And if you look at the website, there's nothing bad in every organization having such things put in place. So anybody is doing the research of what, for example, there are organizations we call the organic entity. It means you have a smooth process from your recruitment to end of production, or it means everything is organized. So there is need for everybody to be available with vital information that guides the operations and every other things concerning the organization. Besides, there is also need for the corporate leader to be a good citizen. What does it take to be a good citizen? Compliance with the laws of the land, and even ensuring that you are a leader. If you are supposed to be a leader, it means you will be doing well.
Okay, this is how far we can go on this week's edition of Your Image. And my guests, of course, have done justice to the topic, public relations and corporate exploitation. I want to say a very big thank you to Mr. Jamiu Fulani, a lecturer in the Department of Mass Communication, Crescent University, Abeokuta. Thank you so very much for being part of the show.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And of course, a veteran public relations practitioner, one-time chairman of NIPR in Ogun State, a fellow of the Institute, Mr. Aki Okudere. Thank you so very much, sir.
Thank you very much. I must quickly say that this is a collective effort for all of us, whether as individuals, group, organizations, or government agencies. We are supposed to ensure adequate compliance so that the environment can be good for us.
Thank you very much, so that the environment can be good for us. Until we meet next week, God willing, for another interesting, fascinating, and scintillating edition of Your Image. Be your brother's keeper.